The X Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. This is the X Zone Radio Show on the Talkstar Radio Network with yours truly, Rob McConnell, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Now, we'd like to hear your comments on the Osama bin Laden death, X Zone Nation. All you have to do is give us a call on our comment line at 1-800-610-7035. It's extension number 5. You've got about 3 minutes to voice your opinion. Please, no foul language, and be responsible, because if we can't air it, we're just going to erase it. So that's at 1-800-610-7035. You can go to www.xzonenews.com/800.htm and hear the recordings of people who've already called in and that we've played on air. So we want you to be part of this. Once again, 1-800-610-7035, extension 5. Joining me now is Julia Espey. She is a retired NASA researcher, a leader in the network marketing industry, a classical painter whose masterpieces have a loyal following, and an author in the area of conscious parenting aimed towards enlightened child development and life preparation. Her first of many books in a series is being released nationally November the 9th. This book is entitled, If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. And 35 fathers share the most important gifts they gave their children, with the foreword by the Chicken Soup for the Souls series co-creator, Jack Canfield, who we've had on the show in the past. If I Were Your Daddy represents the most comprehensive father-mentor guide ever assembled, X Zone Nation, and has been endorsed by Stephen M. R. Covey, Dr. John Gray, the National Fatherhood Initiative, and numerous family therapists and educators throughout the world. Joining me now is Julia Espey. And Julia, welcome to the X Zone.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
My gosh, you're a busy lady. Where do you find time?
Well, when anyone who's a parent who has a job, you have 6 hats you're wearing, so you just sort of fit it all in.
That is so true. We have 6 children and 6 grandchildren, so I know exactly what you mean. Julia, you're a woman writing a book about fathering. Now, that kind of seems a little bit unusual, to say the least. Can you tell us why you wrote the book, and what was your inspiration?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was a single mom for about 7 years, and I was taking my son to the park one day, and I looked down at him as we were walking there, and it struck me like lightning that I had to be mother and father, and I realized that I had no idea how to be a father. It was a thought that overwhelmed me. I felt inadequate. I thought, would he have half of everything he needed to be successful? And on top of that, it was kind of ironic because my background is as you mentioned, I'm a former NASA researcher. So I knew how to guide a 30-ton aircraft, but at that moment, I realized I didn't know how to guide my 30-pound boy.
Wow.
So I started doing research, right? What did great researchers do? They do that, and I
That's
read
right.
lots of parenting books. But what I found was lots of you should do this, you must do that, and I felt even more overwhelmed. And it wasn't until I started doing my own research and writing the book that I needed to read. I needed a book, and I feel like single moms out there and fathers out there and mothers out there, they need a book that maybe just tells them what other people have done that has worked. That's what I was looking for.
I love it.
What was
You and I are
Yes.
going to be sharing the next hour talking about your book that I think is going to open up a lot of eyes, a lot of hearts, and help a lot of kids, as well as moms and dads around the world. Exo Nation, my very special guest this hour is Julia Espey, and we're talking about Julia's book, If I Were Your Daddy. And her website is www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com. Hey, this weekend is Mother's Day, gang. Don't forget that special lady in your life. Make sure you give her a card. Send some flowers if you can. But at the very least, give her a call and say, Mom, I love you.
Daddy, don't you walk so fast? And your daddy's little girl. You're the end of the rainbow, my pot of gold. You're daddy's little girl to have and hold. A precious gem is what you are. Your mommy's bright and shining star. You're the spirit.
And welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour is Julia Espey. We're talking about Julia's book, If I Were Your Daddy. Her website is www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com. Now, Julia, there's a lot of parenting books out there. What's different about this book and all the other parenting books?
Well, there is a huge difference because I went and did so much research out there about what was available, and I found lots of great ideas, but I found them very hard to remember. There was a lot of philosophy, a lot of psychology, and what I needed was, and what I wanted was, can someone just tell me what's worked? I mean, can I just hear from a dad or a mom, just tell me your experiences. I wanted a chicken soup of the soul kind of book that great stories, but that also had parenting lessons in there. And that's what's different about this book.
Now, how long did it take you to write your book, If I Were Your Daddy?
It took about 4 years. And in that time, I also found some pretty startling statistics. And this is just in America alone. There's similar statistics up in Canada too, but that 33% of children are raised in families where the father isn't home. And of those 33%, 70% of all teenage pregnancies, 71% of all chemical addictions, and 80% of prison inmates come from single-parent families.
Wow.
So these statistics, when I got them, I mean, if you weren't already, overwhelmed enough, which I was, I found these and I just knew that I had to put together like a resource manual of tell me what great fathering looks like so that the single moms out there can know how to do it, that the dads that are already great dads but want to be better dads know what to do, and that's why I wrote this book.
That truly is, they're staggering statistics. How did you decide who to interview? And did you have a certain criteria that you followed in each and every interview?
Yeah, of course I did. And I did, and it's because I had one burning question. And it was, what is the most important thing you taught your children? And from that, then I would listen to these dads and I would start to say, well, tell me about the hardest time of, when you had kids, or tell me about a time that you really messed up, or what would you have done differently? So I really got in there and dug. I wanted to know what worked, what didn't work, just give me the inside scoop on parenting, and that's what I got. I got all sorts of practical tips. I've got like over 100 things to do, communication games to play with your kids, how to get them to think for themselves, all sorts of techniques like that. And that's how did you discipline your children? Tell me what that looked like.
Fascinating. What was the common thread that you found with all the dads that you interviewed?
I found that the men really were concerned with building up the emotional and mental bodies of their children. And what I mean by that is these dads really wanted to help their kids learn how to think for themselves. And we know with all the bullying situations going on and all the demands, the forces coming at our children today, the only way to keep them safe, the only way to feel confident when they walk out that door is to know that you've given them a strong inside moral barometer that you can trust. You know that they know how to think through things. They don't necessarily follow their friends, and you've taught them that from a young age. One of the dads, for example, who's the president of Stephen Covey's organization, he's a best-selling author. It's a huge organization. They do leadership retreats everywhere. He told me this technique they played with their kids. It's called Eat an Oreo. Whenever they had to make a decision, the kids had to come to the parents and say, okay, to eat an Oreo. Oreo means opportunity, risk, environment, and outcome. Oreo, opportunity, risk, environment, and outcome. So they had to say, what do they want? They had to think through the risk, what could go wrong, the environment, who was going to be there, was there chaperones, and then the outcome, what are some possible outcomes? And through doing this, one of the dads told me that his daughter decided on her own, not to date an older guy who had a car because she realized that she wasn't prepared to handle if he got, aggressive with her. And so these are kids making decisions that parents don't have to come in and enforce the rules. The kids really learn how to do it themselves. And they started doing this, eating an Oreo when the kids were really young. So that way when it got to the teenage years, they were not seen as controlling parents.
Let me ask you,
how valuable is that?
Well, it's invaluable, and my dad, God bless him, who I thank the good Lord each and every day that my mom and dad are still with us, was my inspiration. Yeah. He was the pillar of our family. Like, we couldn't wait until Sundays because Sunday was very special in our home. Dad got up early, God bless him, even though there were times when he worked 2 jobs to make sure that Mom and my brother and I had what we needed. He would still get up early Sunday morning and cook breakfast. Yeah. And then he'd help Mom throughout Sunday to do whatever it was that she needed done because he was at either 1 or 2 jobs throughout the week. And then Sunday's dinner was very special. It's like we started with a special occasion Sunday and we finished it with a special occasion. And as a child, I remember most of my most wonderful memories with my dad was sitting on our front porch at night talking. He was never too busy to stop and talk. And we don't see that in today's society. Today's society is so fast. It's so impersonal. Like, I've got a sister-in-law who uses Twitter to bring the family to supper in the same house. Now, to me, that's ridiculous.
Well, technology is changing lots of things, and we are moving faster. But in interviewing a lot of these dads, what I found was that it's sort of a playbook, an old-fashioned ways of being, like what you experienced,
right,
where they have family dinners, and they have discussions around family dinners, and how important that is to have that time. Jonathan Rexford, who's the CEO of Habitat for Humanity, he's one of the dads I interviewed, and he travels a lot, and he told me the things he did to make up for the times when he's not around. The games they play,
yeah.
I mean, they get together, they just play board games. They have those kind of times that you remember with your dad,
yes,
and that can anchor a child, even though you have to be gone, 3 or 4 days out of the week. And so moms have to make up for it, right? So if you have a single mom, she's got to fill that role as a dad. And so how does she do that? And that's what I explore in this book.
That's wonderful. I have to ask you, what did the dads feel about a lady writing a book about dads, a lady taking the role of a father?
Well, it's funny you say that. It's kind of cute. One dad, T.H. Record, said to me, and he's actually a Canadian, he said, at the end of it, he said, "Thank you for writing this book." Now, this is a man, it took me like 6 months to get an interview with him with his crazy schedule. But at the end, I mean, he was so grateful. Another one, John Assaraf, who was an author in The Secret, and he's a multimillionaire businessman, can get paid $30,000 an hour. And he, by a company, and he gave me his time. And he said to me, if what I've done with my boys can help other people out there, then I'm all yours. And so I think they were just willing and happy that there was someone that was asking them, because John Assaraf says, look, I've been on Larry King Live, I've been on Oprah, I've been on all these shows, and no one has ever asked me about my parenting.
Wow.
And yet it's one of my top values. So I think it says that, that we're not asking these questions. You're not, that we need to explore parenting more. And I just really want to start the conversations rolling between parents, which is why I'm starting parenting circles all over the world. We've had them going in UK, some forming in Canada, forming in the U.S., where parents can get together and really start sharing what works and what doesn't, and learning from each other. And they're reading the If I Were Your Daddy book as a starting place, but then they're really having discussions, and they're supporting each other.
I think that's fantastic. Like when we look at society, we need a license to drive a car. We need a license to open up a business. We need a license to sell liquor, alcohol, and so on and so forth. And yet we don't need a license to be parents. We're not properly reared or properly educated to be parents unless our parents took the initiative to give us their time, give us their love, and to show us, using themselves as a positive role model, how to be parents.
And that's exactly right. And even if your parents were great parents, good parents, the thing is that kids are no two child is alike.
Yeah.
And so you need lots of options to really handle what comes at them. For example, my parents, I would say, were wonderful parents. They stayed married all my life, and they loved and cared for me. But my mom, when she would get frustrated, she would often resort to yelling. That was sort of her way she got overwhelmed. And so as a result, and she would be very negative, like, if you don't do this, we're going to get in trouble. If you don't do this, we're going to be late. And I learned from Dr. John Gray, who's another dad in this book. He would say it like this. He taught me how to get cooperation out of my son rather than resorting to yelling or getting frustrated.
Sure.
And this is what I learned from him. I used to say, Jackson who's my son. I said, Jackson, if you don't get dressed, we're going to be late. And it was always fear-based and negative-based. And through John Gray, the example, I learned to say, if you get dressed right now, then we'll have more time to play with your cousins. Is that what you want? And so as a result, I just changed around a couple words in a sentence. And so now everything I would ask him to do, I would make it incentive-based. I'd make it positive-based. Now, we have several examples in the book of how to do that. And that just changed my parenting. It made it so much easier.
And we all know that positive reinforcement is a very, very powerful tool, not only at the workplace, not only in society, but especially at home with our children. Julia, you and I have to take a commercial break with the news. Please stand by. A great pleasure talking to you, and congratulations on a book well done.
Oh, thank you so much.
X-Zone Nation, our very special guest this hour is Julia Espey. Her website, www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com, which, by the way, is the name of her book, If I Were Your Daddy. We'll be back on the other side of this news break. And some words from our fine sponsors as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You're the Easter Bunny to Mommy and me. Your sugar, your spice, your everything nice, and your
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splenda, and you're listening to my dad, Rob McConnell, on the X-Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell. Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
I remember Daddy's hands folded silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare. You could read quite a story in the calluses and lines. Years of work and worry had left their mark behind. I remember Daddy's hands, how they held my mama tight and patted my back for something done right. There are things that I've forgotten that I love.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network. My name is Rob McConnell, and my guest this hour is Julia Espey. We're talking about Julia's new book, If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. 35 extraordinary men tell how they've raised and inspired their children. A former NASA researcher, one-time single mother and author, Julia Espey interviewed over 50 highly successful men. Her discoveries are all in her book, which has been endorsed by leadership expert Stephen M.R. Covey, Jack Canfield, co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, and the National Fatherhood Initiative. Her website, www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com. And Julia, welcome back. Great having you with us. And you know, you and I were talking a bit during the news break at the bottom of the hour, and you were going to tell me about a Canadian dad that is in your book.
Yes, well, I really looked to get dads from all over the world, and one is a great dad named Tim Johnson from Canada, and his lesson was great. It was about financial responsibility. I think some of us have heard about the title is called Boomerang Kids. It's
yes.
When you launch a child out, right? You know what I'm talking about?
I sure do.
Where they come back and then they're living at home and
yep.
You don't know what to do as a parent, right? You don't want to kick them out because you're afraid of what might.
It's very simple. You just change the lock on the doors or move and don't let them know where you're gone to.
That is one approach, Ralph. I have to tell you. Well, it's, for those of you listening that maybe that doesn't fit right with, because that is one approach. Tim Johnson's chapter is all about how to help kids become financially responsible. And throughout the If I Were Your Daddy book, the theme is, look, if you give a child anything, they have to earn it. They have to earn it. And anyone given, the world on a silver platter will let it, rust.
That's right.
And so you have to help them step by step take on more responsibilities, prove it to themselves that they're capable, because really you have like a loss of self-esteem. And so instead of waiting till it's at that point, what do you do about it? And that's what Tim Johnson talks about heads on. And here's this multi-millionaire up there in Canada, you guys, and he owns a lot of real estate, and he would not rescue his kids at all. He empowered them so that they became really strong and knew that they were capable and could support themselves. So it's a pretty exciting chapter.
What I see, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm looking at it the wrong way, is that a lot of parents in today's society want to be best friends or friends to their children instead of remaining as parents.
Yes. Yeah, we get that. Yeah, we get to hear that a lot. And one of the dads actually spoke to that. And he says, look, you can't be your child's best friend. It's my responsibility to be your father first. And one of the stories in it, because this book is, 35 stories of lives that are written like chicken soup, for the soul chapters, right? So the daughter calls, she decides that she doesn't want to follow the business that they've learned how to do. She's going to go off on her own. And she goes against her dad, and she goes off, and she's living by herself, and then she realizes she's broke. She can't pay rent. So she calls home and she says, Mom and Dad, would you lend me some money? I can't pay my rent. And they said, honey, you know, you're 21, you're smart, you're resourceful, you know, we believe in you, but we're not going to lend you money. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet. And for the next 2 weeks, the daughter would call up crying, and they would just support her so much, spiritually, mentally, and everything, but they would not lend her money. And what did the daughter do? She figured it out. She went back to work with what the business she already knew how to do. She went back into that business and built a huge business. But the thing is that was so valuable is because they didn't swoop in and rescue her. She went through that tough time, and she figured it out. And as a result, she's super confident, and she knows that she can weather any storm. She doesn't have to rely on Mom and Dad. She doesn't have to feel dependent on them. She's got that self-esteem, and that's what's important with children.
You know, it's interesting that you interviewed all these super successful people, Julia. But what about the ordinary person? You know, the company worker, the guy that works for GM, or the person that, you know, sets up the seats inside of an arena, or even the guy who drives the garbage truck. Weren't these kind of people good enough to interview?
Oh, you're funny, Rob. Of course they are. And the thing is that, you know, the book is already 350 pages. And,
wow.
And although they're written in stories, and so they're easy to read, you know, you can only interview so many people. And that's exactly why I'm setting up parenting circles, like, around the world, so that parents can come and learn from each other. Because I'm a collector of stories. Tell me a story that works, because I'll remember a story that I won't remember philosophy or psychology. But if someone tells me something they did with their child that worked, I'll remember it, and then I'll be able to use it with my own son. So we're facilitating all these parenting circles, and if you're interested in being a part of one, you can send me an email at julia@ifiwereyourdaddy.com, and I will hook you up with the closest one to where you are.
And that's at julia@ifiwereyourdaddy.com. Exonation, our special guest this hour is Julia Espey, and she is the author of If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. 35 Extraordinary Men tell you how they raised and inspired their children. Her website is www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com. Tell me, Julia, how has the journey writing the book, If I Were Your Daddy, changed you? Changed your life and those lives of your children?
Well, the difference is that I went from being very overwhelmed and then reading statistics that what happens with single-parent families and what kids are up against. And so I went from feeling very inadequate to feeling resourceful and knowing that I could handle things and handling things with my son better, because now I've got the voices of 35 other men, great fathers in my head, sort of teaching me, instructing me how to handle things. So because I have so many options, I now know how to handle things. For example, now I no longer make rules. I make agreements with my son, and we negotiate the consequences ahead of time. So he tells me he's going to do his homework before 5 p.m., and I say, well, what if you don't do your homework before 5 p.m.? What's the consequence? And we negotiate it. And guess what? I have very little him not doing what he says, and if he does, I just enforce the consequences. I'm no longer the bad guy. So as a result, I never have to raise my voice with him.
Right.
I just know how to handle things better, and that's what I'm all about, is giving parents options.
So what you're doing basically is, number one, you're using positive reinforcement instead of, as you gave the example, you're going to be late, but if you get dressed early and we're there early, you can spend more time with your cousins, and then you're putting the ball in their park and making them accountable for their own decisions.
Absolutely. I've heard back from so many moms, and they say things like, my daughter used to be, she's so strong-willed that when I started using some of the ideas in the If I Were Your Daddy book, I then found that there was much less fighting at home, there was much more harmony, and they just, they're thanking me for it because they're just really practical. And when you read them, they're really not hard to implement.
I can see another use for your book, and that would be for people in troubled relationships, because basically a mom and a dad who are having a problem, there's very little difference between a mom and a dad and a daughter or a mom and a son. This would work well in any situation where there's possible conflict and a way to resolve it amicably.
Absolutely. In fact, my mother called me and she said, I used what I learned in John Gray's chapter on your father. My 87-year-old female father, bless his heart. She says I was motivating him positively, and it worked.
Yeah.
And then I hear back from other women who tell me that they are, and men who tell me that they're reparenting themselves because they perhaps didn't have the best relationship with their dad, and now they get to feel like what they would have learned had they had a really great, present dad, a dad that was there more.
I remember my grandparents, especially my grandmother, saying you get more with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
So
it's absolutely true.
Wise people.
Yeah, and that's another one of the themes throughout the book, which is how to focus on what's positive in a child and ignore as much as possible what's not working. That doesn't mean that you don't address it if there's a problem, but it means that you focus on where they're good at something. You help them feel good about their strengths instead of just focusing on what needs to be fixed. And the result is you get a lot more confident children, and you get children growing up knowing that they're special and they're unique and they know why. So it's a really powerful lesson. That another thing that I learned from doing this, and I'm getting parents writing in saying that there's some ways to identify the gifts in your children, and they're practicing it, and they're discovering their children in new ways because they didn't know what to look for.
Plus, you're getting families to communicate, and I believe in this highly advanced technological world that we're living in, there's not enough communication between mom, dad, mom, brother, sister. The family unit doesn't communicate anymore like we used to way back when. My gosh, listen to me talking about way back when. But it seems that one of the key secrets to your book, If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn how to communicate.
Absolutely. And not only that, because it talks about men who do communicate with their children really well. So when you see someone else doing it, then it sort of gives you a template for how to do it. But there's also some games in there that you can play. For example, there's one game called the Upset, Want, and Appreciate game. And I've used that with my son so many times. I'm recently remarried.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Well, now you've got a boy that's been used to just mom for 7 years, and now there's this new dad in town, right? The new sheriff is in town, right? Yeah, so there's a little bit of, sometimes in the beginning conflict going on, and so I'd have to sit them both down and say, okay, we're going to play the Upset, Want, Appreciate game, and it goes like this. One says what they're upset with, what they want to happen and what they appreciate about the other person, and then the other person will take their turn. And there's like 3 examples in the book of how to do this and how to get it right. But what it did is it broke through something with them where they were hugging at the end. My son said things that we never would have gotten, that he was sort of starting to bury inside, and you can see how big explosions and upsets really are things that get buried.
Yes.
And so this enabled it to come to the surface so they could both hear it. And because it was a fun game or a structured game, mom, son, and dad did it, and it just made a big difference.
Sounds like you've come across the winning combination to saving a lot of families.
Well, I certainly want to start the conversation going about, let's just, as parents, start asking each other what works, what doesn't. And that's what I did. I just wrote down stories of things that have worked, and if they didn't work, tell me what didn't work. You need what works and what doesn't work, right?
That's
so
right.
That you can learn from each other. Yeah.
Tell me, we touched on this briefly. How do you suggest, or did anybody talk about the new technology and how it should be addressed in the home?
Yeah, there was actually one dad that did. He's a Grammy-winning recording musician, and he has some very strict rules about how technology is brought into the home. And he always makes sure, he lives in sunny California, so it's beautiful weather to ride your kid around on his bike. But every day he makes sure he's out on the bike, and they have a garden, and they're doing things, and they go camping. So he's very conscious that you have to schedule in nature time in this day and age, because what do kids do? They're inside playing sports on the video games
Right.
as opposed to out there,
Yeah.
right? So what we took for granted before has to be scheduled in. And as a result of talking to this man, I've actually started consciously doing more with my son. It's like I became more aware that this is a commodity that's escaping us, and how important it is not to. Because if we don't teach our children to love and appreciate nature, then what's the chances that we're going to have forests and parks? And, how will our kids appreciate Mother Earth if we don't bring it to them? So I've changed my parenting, and I've gotten people writing in. He also gives a yoga routine that he does with his kids every morning. So these are the kind of things that, I captured in the If I Were Your Daddy book.
You and I have to take our final break. Julia, please stand by. Exonation Julia Espey is our special guest this hour. She's the author of If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. 35 extraordinary men tell you how they raised and inspired their children. Her website, www.ifiwereyourdaddy.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And don't forget, X Zone Nation, this coming Sunday is Mother's Day or Father's Day, whoever. Even if it's an uncle, an aunt, call them up and just give them a very little message and make their day. I love you. Thank you for everything you've done. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
And patted my back for something done right. There are things that
You're my love, you're my angel, you're the girl of my dream. I thank you, oh baby, for waiting patiently. Daddy's home to stay.
Exonation, Julia Espey is our guest this hour, and we're talking about Julia's new book, If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. And first of all, Julia, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight here on the X Zone. I love what you're doing, and, gosh, I wish you all the success in the world, and I hope that your book touches as many hearts on the shelves as it has tonight here on this program.
Oh, thank you so much. I get some emails back, and the moms have said that they're crying after reading my introduction, because I just sort of bare my heart as to why I wrote the book, which was to help the moms out there that have to do both roles, to help the dads be better dads, to help the grandparents know how to be a better grandparent, and just, to give people options into parenting, because, children are a handful, and we've got to be prepared to how to handle each one differently.
Can you leave us with 3 great parenting tips that come from your book?
Absolutely. One is you make agreements, not rules, with your children. You'll have a lot more harmony in your house. And, negotiate consequences ahead of time. And here's another one. Be consistent, 100% consistent with them on enforcing it. And those are just 3 things. 100% consistency, negotiate your consequences ahead of time, and make agreements.
Julie, I know you offer other free stuff on your website. What's your website name, and how can people get a copy of your book, If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn?
Great. They can preview the book with 3 free chapters at the website, ifiwereyourdaddy.com. They just go to the Try It button. But it is available anywhere. It's available at Amazon and the different local retailers, or on the website. So it's available in every kind of retail outlet.
Julia, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and once again, I wish you all the best success in the world. Now, are you going to be coming out with another book?
Oh, absolutely. If I Were Your Mommy. I'm already making it, writing it, and it's just great to see the difference between dads and moms, and I can't wait to release that one. Now,
earlier in the show, you gave out an email address if people wanted to contact you. Could you give our listeners your email address one more time?
Absolutely. It's Julia at ifiwereyourdaddy.com if you want to be a part of a parenting circle, or if you want to start one. we are just gathering up names and bringing people together.
Julia, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you and yours. A very happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
Bye-bye now. Exonation, my guest this hour has been Julia Espey. She is the author of If I Were Your Daddy, This Is What You'd Learn. 35 extraordinary men tell how they've raised. Whoa, I'll get it right yet. Let's try this one again. 35 extraordinary men tell you how they raised and inspired their children. Once again, her website is www.ifIWereYourDaddy.com. Now, when I come back from the news at the top of the hour, at 6.5 minutes past, more from the X Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Our worldwide toll-free number is 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. If you'd like to give us your opinion on the death of bin Laden, our toll-free comment line is 1-800-610-7035, extension number 5. That's 1-800-610-7035. And to listen to what people from around the world have already called in and said, www.xzonenews.com /800-800.htm.